Okay, I think we are live once again. Let's do this. Let's have a look. So, just to recap from last week, this is where we got to. We set up our simulation. So we got the main balls flying around, and when they're infected, they're pink, and then they start emitting their little kind of subparticles. I'm going to go through this in exactly the way I would was if I was doing a project myself, which is kind of, there's no set rhythm to it. It's just like what I would do next. So I think the first thing that I would do is get Redshift up and running. Let's do that. So you go Redshift, Redshift render view is what we want. And for this tutorial, I'm gonna tuck him in there. And if we hit play, we should get nothing. We get absolutely nothing, and that's because I'm just going to delete that. We need to go to our emitters in XParticles and right-click Redshift tags, and we need to add a Redshift object tag. There it is, and hit play. Again, nothing happens, and that's because in the tag we need to. There's a particle section here in the tag. And we need to tell it to render those particles. So on the non-affected one, at the moment it's disabled, but if we start running through these, if we put sphere instances, we now start to get actual geometry, which is renderable in the scene. And it's already picking up the colors of the particles, which is fantastic. That's exactly what we want. Let me run through the options here as well. What we can also do is we can have a look at point instances. That's just going to do circles. Sphere instances, which is what we want. Quad instances, as it sounds, just squares. Custom objects is good. With custom objects, you can add in, let's not use a cube. Let's go for a platonic. So if we have a platonic there, whack that down in size. Okay, there's the platonic. And now in the object tag, if we drag the platonic in, there we go. So we've got platonics instead of if you did do that, let me show you how you get the particle color data back. You would then materials, Redshift. We want particle. Redshift is really good and it has all these presets. So let's hit particle. Double click that, open it up, see what's going on in the node editor. Now, if you've never used node editors before, don't worry. It's scary at first. You're like, what the is going on? But it's really not that simple. In Redshift, this is where the party's at right here. This box here, if you click off it, there's nothing. If you click into it, then you now get all of the options up. And this is much more what you're used to in classic C4D, where you can change the diffuse color, look at reflection values, refraction if it's like a glass material or something like that, and subsurface settings. And this is where you can do stuff. But with the node editor, what's great is you can plug different things in, and that's exactly what's happening here, because this little node here is saying retrieve the particle data, retrieve the color, any other particle data. So just for Redshift, I think you can just get particle color, which is all we really want for rendering. And it's saying, okay, particle color, you go into the diffuse channel of the material, and that's a great start. That's all we want. But to do that, we need to now bring our particle texture onto the platonic, and there we go. It started to pick up the colors. But we are going to use sphere instances because it's quick. There's also a setting here called optimize spheres. We're not going to be using that, and I'll show you why later on. But optimize spheres is really good if you've got a super complex particle system, millions and millions of particles. Optimize spheres is good because it's really, really quick. But for us, we want sphere instances. Okay. Now, this texture that we've just made, we need to drop that onto our non-infected particles, and now that'll enable us to start getting kind of more using this texture tag. We can like control the reflection, control and anything we want. You know, we can go full into the texturing using, you know, this texture tag here. So we're going to drop that on there. Let's delete that platonic. We don't want him in the scene. Let me think. What would I do next? So we've got spheres. We've got a texture tag on those spheres. They're moving around. I'm not going to worry so much right now about the sneazy particles. We're going to come back to that later. I'm just going to save this as we go. I think now I would look at maybe getting a kind of a studio sweep scene in, like a floor object. We use this guy's tools. His name's Jory, and he runs Pixar Lab. Really, really good. And it's just sort of kind of preset scenes. And it's, if you're, you know, in a hurry, backs to the wall, you need stuff like this. Really, really quick, saves time. And preset scenes, I think we use this one. So double click this. You can go in, and he's got a scene set up with a kind of a placeholder object. You can go in here, move the camera around, and the way that he's got his scene set up is on this null object here. You can control all of the settings of the lights using this null and the HDRI and stuff like that. Well, a little trick that we do for time is if you go into the layers section, you see he's got a layer set up, and he's actually hidden the contents to keep things clean in the object window here. He's hidden the contents. If you click that little button here, you can now see. So you can see his lights, see the dome light, and what I'm really interested in quickly getting is this stage object with the bend on, which is, let me just come out of that camera, this guy here, this kind of nice sweep object. So copy that, and let's drop it in our scene. Okay, there it is, lovely in the scene. Let's position it a bit, whack up the scale, and then from a side view, let's bring it down so it's just clipping the bottom of those spheres as close as we can get it. That'll do for now. There we go again. Let's just check that setup, move it back. Bit bigger. I think that'll do. Okay, so we've got a nice shiny floor. It's brought in the default stage object. Let's get rid of that. We're going to retexture that with our own Redshift one. So let's do that actually. Create Redshift Material, and just use this top one here. This will give you a standard material. Let's rename it Floor. And I'm just going to dig into the project file and find the reference. A good point now. When we were doing the project, we had this bit of reference that we were working from, and it was great because it gives us something to work with. You know, we know exactly what we're shooting for. Now, we didn't. This looks like it's computer generated. I think it probably is. It's a lovely render. We didn't shoot for exactly that look. It's slightly different for us, but it's a really good point of reference. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to color pick that floor. I'm going to drag you in. Yeah. Stick you there. And in the texture tag here for our floor, like I said, this is where the part is at. RS material, diffuse color. We can just go and color pick that. Okay. Also, what we can do is, it looks like a kind of a plasticky floor, and Redshift's got some presets set up in here, and there should be a plastic one. Now, nothing much changes with the plastic. It's going to give us, we'll have to repick that color. It changes the IOR value. The reflection angle changes, but nothing much changes. Quite a simple preset. And let's color pick that floor again. Okay, cool. Now we need to drop that floor onto the stage. Let's make that big again. All right. Let's have a look at the texture settings inside the floor. First of all, it's mega shiny. Let's drop the shiny down. You just change that in reflection there, something like 0.8. And the roughness value, I think this is where you get the most of the biggest changes in your texture, like what sort of texture you're going for. And plastic, kind of soften everything up, 0.3, something around there. We're going to look at this backlighting translucency for when we come onto the sneazy bubbles. We use that. It's kind of a backlit kind of look. You'll see it exactly when we do the sneazy stuff. You can change the reflection color. For now, all the highlights are coming through as white. You can change those colors. We're going to leave it as white, and that is going to do for our floor just for now. Okay, next thing I would do is probably bring in, well, let's save it. Next thing I'd do is probably bring in a HDRI, because HDRIs are quick, and if you can get your scene running, looking good with a HDRI, happy days. It's going to save you time in render time because it doesn't have to calculate other lights, and you can get some really nice looks. Now, we used a pack from Grayscale Gorilla. The link is in the bio. Same with Pixar Lab, links in the bio. And to do that in Redshift, you go lights, and it's called a dome light. That's what they call their HDRIs. So by default, I think it'll just bring in a kind of a white scene. Yeah, attributes. Sorry, that's what I was looking for. We need to tell it what HDRI to use, and that's in the path here. And I think we settled on, for our project, one from the Pro Studio Metals pack from GSG, Grayscale Gorilla, Nick Campbell and co. Drop him in. Cool. And then let's just put the exposure up a little bit. Right, nice. We're starting to get a bit more of a scene going on. Okay, the particles are too shiny. So in here, RS material, let's bring the weight of the reflection down a little bit. You can see the HDRI reflections there, what the HDRI setup is doing. And let's bring the roughness up. Again, if we sort of match the floor, in the reference image, you know, they almost look like they're made of exactly the same material, these guys. So, you know, you'd imagine that the material should be pretty similar. See the diffuse color there is grayed out. That's because the particle information is running it. Refraction, transmission, we're not using any of those. Reflection color can stay as white. And then we can bring this down to 1.49, more of a plastic look. Marginal gains. Next, what would we do next? Let's just have a look, run it on. Let's see how the pink's looking. Okay. The pink's looking okay. The blues are looking a little bit blingy. Now, with this setup, if we want to change the color of the sort of the main blue spheres, we need to change them, and we also need to change them in 2 locations. So here's our non-infected emitter. If you go to display, here's our display color. But if you remember from the previous tutorial, when you set up groups, the groups take over. And so actually, if we change that color, I don't think anything should happen. And it doesn't. And it's because the color is now driven by here, this one. So if we want to make that less blingy, we can just drop it down a bit. How's that? You got to always go back to the start to check this. There, okay, that's looking a bit more calmer. It's looking, although a little bit dirty, but I think that could be the lighting. But one thing to check out here is that this this infected particle here, which is changing its color over time, it's not starting with the same color as all the other spheres, and that is because we have a color modifier which has got a color change gradient. So we need to match this starting blue with the blue that we've just made here. Copy, XP color, let's paste it in there. Now run that back to the start, and it's changing its color from the same color that all the other particles are changing from. And that is the same with the pink. So with the pink that we've got in the infected channel, actually the pink that it ends up on is this one in the color modifier. So if we want to change the end color pink, let's say we're thinking it's a bit too blingy and just want to bring it down, now that will make a slight change to that pink. Okay, what would we do next? I think we'll save it. After this, I think I'd probably keep on working on the lighting a bit more. And if we go back to the reference image, we've got some quite sort of longish shadows coming across the shot. It feels like there's light sources over here, top left of the shot. It feels like it needs some light there. And to save time, I go back into Clean Studio and I would take these lights, let's copy them out of the scene. Let me just show you where those lights are. These are these area lights, Redshift area lights. There's the left one. There's the right one. Inside a null. And they've also got target tags, which we can make our own. So if we just take both of those lights, shot one, drop it in. Just gonna pause that a second, save it. Okay, we want our light sources to be coming from over here a little bit. And interesting, from that scene, these area lights, the way that they were set up by the Pixar Lab, is one is on a temperature mode, so you can control the color of that by changing the temperature. And this one is, they're both on temperature. Okay, let's just change that to color and we'll make those white. Okay, and then for the strength, if we bring them both to 5 to start off with, and they've got a target tag on there. I'll show you how to set this up if you haven't done this before. Right click on your object, animation tag target, control drag to copy it, and then it needs a target object that we're looking at. So let's set up a kind of a, let's say we were looking at this set of spheres here. The thing we're going to do is I'm going to make a camera, and that's going to save that position that I've just got in my viewport there. And let's create a null object, which is going to be our target. We can drag that into the target object there of both of those tags. And let's find the target. Oops. There you are. And you see as I'm moving that target, the lights are changing around. So we want our light to be shining roughly in that direction. We could also use that as a focus on the camera later on. Useful trick. And let's check our IPR window. Right, okay. It's much, much brighter. The lights aren't in the right position, but it's putting a lot more light on the scene. And we're also getting some slightly different reflections now. You can see this sort of rectangle here that's been caused by what's probably the light on the right side. That will be that one on the left hand side there, that will be the light on the left. In our reference, it's looking like all the light source is coming from the left there, hitting there. So we will move our lights around. And the great thing about having the target now is you can be really sloppy with how you move stuff around, but the angle of the light is going to be always shining towards your objects in the scene. So that was our left light, redshift area light. Okay, I'm just going to turn off the dome light a second, and wow, we're getting some really long shadows on the scene. It looks like there's a light source coming from sort of the top, what would be north. If we had a north, south, east, west, imagine a north light coming in, and then we've got like a west, north and a west, or somewhere in there. So let's try that. Left light moving round. That area light come down. Let's see how high they are. Okay, quite high in the sky. Let's bring them down a bit. Okay, and we're getting a lot more. Seems like that one is casting a lot more of a reflection than that one. I think also the lighting situation, it needs to be a bit broader, and you would do that by bringing up the size of your. This is going to increase the power of the light as well, but it's also going to make the sort of the light source feel more broader, and that left light as well. Okay, cool. Back in our camera, come out again. Let's see what's going on. They're also probably a bit close. Let's bring him away. Oh, that's gone huge. Yeah, let's check that through our camera now. Bit more work on this guy. Come around a bit. The great thing about Redshift, any GPU rendering, is you just get instant feedback. I think for users back in the day who are used to the old ways, you know, this is such a revelation. Let's save this. At this point, and probably should have done this a little bit earlier, to be honest, is if we go into a Redshift settings, if we change the renderer there to Redshift, this will allow us to get into the Redshift settings. So click Redshift, we can now get in and have a look. And one of the main things that will change the look in your scene is the GI tab. So watch what happens when I add some bounces. So the first one, let's go for brute force. Okay, and instantly everything becomes a little bit more infilled, more realistic, generally more fun. And we went for our project Irradiance Point Cloud. Yeah, lovely. Stick our dome light back on. Wow, that's gone nice and bright, but looking quite cool. Looking similar, I'd say, to where we got to with our project. What next? What next? Let's save it. Let's not go too much further into, you know, tweaking the floor colors, particle colors in the main shot. Let's have a look now at the sneazy particles, because the lighting choices that we make will affect those particles quite heavily. So let's get them in there. And to recap again, to do that, there's our spawning sneazy emitter. We need to load in a redshift tag to say render those particles. Redshift object, and on the mode we want sphere instances. Okay, now it's brought in those spheres pretty big. We don't want them that big, so you got a scale multiplier here in the object tag. try 0.5, and that is not bad. It's probably about the right size. Let's have a look. Yeah, maybe a tad bit smaller. 0.4, let's do that. Cool, and you get instant feedback in the window, which is quite cool. Split the difference. Oh, not anal or anything. Yeah, that's looking good for me. We will take that. Now these particles, we don't need the X particle color data on them. So for the texture tag, we don't need to, in Redshift Materials, we don't need to use the particle preset. We don't need to get the color data from the particle. We can just go standard material. Let's rename it. Sneazy. And here, let's give a shout out to David Broder, because he showed us how to do this technique in a SIGGRAPH talk that he did. I'm going to bring his stuff in. And he is just simply awesome. Great designer, but he's really into this kind of see-through translucent stuff that you do in Redshift. Really, really nice. Check his reel out. Really, really cool. And I'd really recommend watching this. Any part of the SIGGRAPH, the stuff that Maxon puts on their channel is great. SIGGRAPH, Rewind, IBC, NAB, all of the kind of industry shows. You get so much good stuff. It's really good, cool for learning. So in his show, David talks about how he textured this, and it was exactly the look that we wanted. So we use some of those techniques. Okay, what we need to do is bring that texture onto there, and now we're starting to, that texture now is starting to apply to the particles. And let's go, let's show you what we did. So we used the pink in our diffuse channel, and it doesn't have to be perfect, just get that kind of bright pink in there. And now this backlight and translucency, we change this to white, and nothing will happen yet because we need to put the power up. See the weight value there, as you start to put this up, it now starts to feel like they've got a glow to them, and we can whack that right up. And now the next thing that we did is in the refraction transmission. Hold on, I've lost it. There it is. Drop that back down. At the moment, there's the weight is nothing, so we can put that up. And if we have it on white, then it's going to start looking like. Let's make this bigger so we can see. Let's also move our camera in a tad. Oh, where have you gone? Yeah. Oh yeah, nice and big. Probably a bit too big. Yeah, so in the texture tag here, that reflection transmission color is white, so looks see-through. Quite cool, really nice look that. But the director said we want it to feel like it's come from the infected particles, so this is where we can start playing with colors in that channel, and it changes the look completely. And the other thing that we did is we checked this thin-walled, and as I understand it, thin-walled kind of means, rather than you being, as it sounds, rather than you being a solid kind of glass sphere, you need to be more like a paper object or something like that, that she's got it hollow inside. So check thin-walled. Yep, lovely. Okay, we're not getting enough color in, and we probably want to bring down the backlighting. Yeah, so if we bring down the level of the backlighting, we can start to bring some more color into those particles. Roughly 0.5, say. And we can play with the amount of refraction. If we just tail it off a tad. We can also put some roughness in the reflection channel, and that will just kind of give them a bit more of a diffusey type look. Let's make them a bit more see-through. And this weight of pink is probably too much. There we go. And from here on in, it's just a case of tweaking. Keep on playing. Bring that right down, just bring that back up. I want it to be a bit more see-through, I think. And to do that, let's tail off that pink. Yeah, that's cool. That's nice. Bring the diffuse right down just to check it. And then start adding some of those pink tinges back in. Okay, cool. I'm happy with that for now. Let's just run the sim on. Yeah, quite nice. Quite nice. We could keep on tweaking all of those values until your heart's content, until you get the exact look that you want. But we will take that right now. And then the final thing to do is set up a camera. So we've got a camera already in the scene. Let's use it. The focal length is 36. There's loads of tutorials about focal lengths. Really like 50mm cameras, to be honest. Sort of a classic camera used in all sorts of situations. Let's just frame this up. Get a bit of stuff in the background. Now we want some bouquet. In Redshift it's called bouquet, depth of field. Same thing. And to do that, Redshift tags, Redshift camera tag, and nothing will happen. And that's because in the tag here, you need to go to bouquet, click override. Still nothing will happen. Redshift seems like really protective of changing anything. So then you have to hit enabled. Okay, now we've got bouquet, which is crazy too big. So the main setting that you want to use to change the bouquet is the circle of confusion radius, COC. You can change the power, but it's not. It just changes the overall power on how much blur. It's like a blur setting, but the COC radius is more like an aperture setting on a camera, so it will change the depth of field. I'm saying these things. This is how I understand it. Someone will probably write in and tell me that's not right. But let's bring that down to 0.5. And the other thing that we want to do is we want to get a focus null in the scene. You will see on the tag here, derive focus distance from camera. I would always recommend to do it that way because you get more control in the C4D camera. You can add in a focus object here and keyframe that and change that. So we will do exactly that. So bring in a null. Let's call this focus. And drop him to roughly where we want to be focusing. And let's get right on the edge of that ball there. And last thing we need to do is in the focus object, bring that focus in. And then, yeah, hey presto, all of a sudden, it's rack focused the camera to that front point there. And then that makes it really easy for when you're getting into animation and you're moving a camera around and objects are moving around. You can move your focus object with it to sort of, pull the viewer to different parts of your scene. If you want to get right in on that soap bubble there, then you can do. Or if you want it to be on the ball and everything else out of focus. And COC radius, let's just bring that down a bit so it's not too crazy. Or if you want, you can go for like a super, back to 1, and you get a super almost macro style shot. 0.5 will do, quite nice. Okay, that is about it. That is as far as we went with this project, apart from animating cameras animating focus distances, setting up all our shots. One final thing, a useful tip before I go is the stage object. If you hit Shift C, it will bring up this little box. Type in there stage, bring in the stage object, and we used we use switching of cameras using this stage object. You can keyframe cameras to use at different points, and we did that. It saves rendering time, so you don't have to render more frames than you need of a certain camera, and then bring that into a compositing software and switch between them. It also allows you to kind of look at your scene and get time in and do low res renders before you go into your high res renders. So in your stage objects, we've got camera. Let's call this camera close. Let's set up another camera top. Let's just look through that. You want to kind of create a top-down scene. And let's say after 49 frames, we were on the close camera the whole time. In our stage object, we click and drag camera close, hit a keyframe. So that's going to keyframe it at 49. G on the keyboard, go one on. And then we want to change that to camera top. We click and drag it in, add a keyframe, which means from the start of our scene, we'll be running through, and then boom, it can change to the top. Useful tip. Really, really good for anything that you're doing. That about wraps it up, guys. Any questions you've got, just fire them in any of the chats. That is it from me. We'll be back with, let me get my face on the screen. Camera and a logo. We'll be back with more tutorials, I'm sure, during this lockdown period. Yeah, stay happy, stay safe. See you soon. Bye.